I press record. Thanks, Gary.
I knew you'd forget.
I would, yeah. So if you can do that, and then if you can hear me okay, use the green tick on the participant list to just let me know that you can hear me. Any problems today? I've got Gary, my webinar accountability buddy, helping me with the tech today. So don't ask him any university questions, but if you do have any questions or any problems, if you pop them into the chat, then Gary is going to pick up on those for me. So thank you very much, Gary, for doing that. Okay, so it looks like we've got a full house. Do pull up that participant list so that you can see who else is here, because you might have some buddies in and amongst there. And if you can hear me, give me a green tick. Any problems, pop it in the chat and Gary will let me know. Okay, so I've got predictably, some slides for you. We are going to go old style a bit later with the flip chart, but I'm going to start with some slides just to get us going. So what we've got in this coming hour is really hopefully a time for me to say kind of the things that I've learnt over the past 4 or so months since lockdown began, and to hopefully elicit some good practice from you all. So I'm not holding myself up as an expert, but what I was finding was I was being asked similar sorts of questions. So I thought if I share that in a useful way, and now I've recorded it, thanks to Gary, I can share it a bit wider. And then hopefully you've learned some brilliant lessons along the way that you can share. Okay, so first things first, I just want to know who everyone is and where you're from. So if you can, hover over the screen to near where it says you're sharing Emma Williams's screen. So that's a green thing. Next to that, there should be an options button. And if you click on options, you should find annotate, which is the pencil. Click on annotate and up pops a little bar, hopefully, with T for text. There's a drawing button, there's a stamp, there's a spotlight, all sorts of things. All I want you to do is select T for text. On your format, you can select your favorite color and font size if you want, and then pick a box on the grid. If everyone picks this box, we're going to get a bit squashy. So pick a box that you think no one else is going to pick, and just let me know which university you're from, or if you're freelance, just where you're based. That would be fantastic, just so we get a sense of who is here. Fantastic. Welcome, Queen Mary. I'm going to put you in the same box. Different colours, obviously. Look, brown and pink. Imperial College, Newcastle, University of York, Sheffield, Switzerland, Cambridge, Sheffield. Oh, I'm going to put Sheffield with, oh, there we go. Lots of Sheffields. Bristol, Oxford. Where else we've got? Liverpool, freelance based in Cambridge. All the best people are based near Cambridge. I'm just south of Cambridge. Newcastle, fantastic. I'll pop you over with the other Newcastle person. Welcome, Pat, being freelance. We've got a couple of people from Imperial, University of Bristol. 2 of you have obviously picked the same colour. Great. So we've got a nice big spread of different people from around the globe. Yeah, international webinar. So welcome, firstly, all of you. If you're freelance, don't worry about talking to your university colleagues. I'm sure that you do it all the time anyway. But do share practice when you get a chance. So I'm going to ask everyone, I think pretty much everyone has put their video off just while I'm talking. And then when you go into the breakout rooms, feel free to turn that video on, unless of course you haven't tidied up, in which case keep it off. There have to be advantages to being in Zoom. The other thing that I wanted to highlight was that this, apart from Pat, who's put her name here, well done, Pat, is it's nice, anonymous way of doing stuff. And part of the reason that I'm asking you to turn your video off is that I found when working with researchers, they are in, they might be in their bedroom, they might be in a very small kitchenette that they're trying to work from. And it's very personal being in people's homes. I'm sure you, like me, have spent large amounts of time in virtual meetings with cats and children, and oh, I wonder what their bookshelf is. And I know that someone today has actually rearranged their bookshelf in light of what they found on Zoom calls. So that's part of the reason why I asked researchers to turn off their videos, so that they feel comfortable and in a safe space. Obviously, they do need to be able to talk and be able to hear for most courses. But I found that the video, although it obviously helps with rapport, it isn't necessary for most of it. And importantly, it really helps with the bandwidth. So you're not, you know, kind of everyone is wrestling with the rest of their house for bandwidth in this virtual world. So if we can make that a bit easier for people, then that's a great thing to do. I'm just going to save that picture and I can send that around later. I'm going to clear that one off. Okay. So a little bit about this crazy woman who's popped up on your screen. So hello, if we haven't met. My name's Emma, Dr. Emma Williams. A long time ago, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I did a degree in physics at Cambridge, but I am very normal and extremely chatty. To cut a very long story short, I then went into a PhD. I then went into a postdoc. So I've very much been there, worn the lab coat of the people that I now work with. Had a career break to have my first child, and during that really decided that I'd kind of been there, worn the lab coat, and I wanted to do something else. As it happened, I ended up in learning and development. I'm sure most of you have a similar tale. No one ever grows up wanting to be in L&D. We don't know it exists. So I sort of fell into it. Had a brilliant boss who brought me on. Absolutely loved being in the training room as it was then. And to cut a long story short, I was head of academic staff development at Cambridge before I left. And the reason that I left was I wasn't in the training room anymore. Someone had promoted me and I wasn't doing the stuff that I really, really love, which is working with researchers, seeing those light bulb moments go on. That's what I really enjoy. And so 11 years ago, touching my new desk, I went freelance, and it's been an interesting ride. I can say that the past 4 months have been very interesting. But that's where I'm coming from. So the background of having been a researcher, moved through university professional services, so I get exactly where you're sitting, and then being freelance. So that's me, a potted history of me. And I'm based just near Cambridge, although that is becoming increasingly irrelevant as we can work pretty much anywhere with any university at the moment. So since lockdown, this is all about virtual training. So since lockdown, I just went through my diary as I was preparing for this. And I've, like I'm sure the rest of you, have been on a very steep upward trajectory. So I've done 3 train the trainer sessions on how to use Zoom for various university clients. I've done 18 virtual live training events, which have gone from everything from a sort of hour-and-a-half seminar to whole day virtual trainings. I've done 31 one-to-ones with postdocs in various guises. So those might be sort of career discussions, applications, mock interviews, all sorts of things like that. And randomly, this is something that I never thought I'd do, I got involved in running thankfully just one, virtual 3-day conference. We were supposed to be meeting face to face. Obviously, we had to pivot that one around quite quickly. So yeah, I've had a bit of a trial by fire, as I'm sure the rest of you have, and also lots and lots and lots and lots of Zoom meetings. So the experiences that I'm going to talk about today come from that. Thankfully, prior to COVID hitting, I had used Zoom reasonably frequently for meetings and things. And I had come across using creating online courses. So I got the lights, I had a backdrop, I had a microphone, which is, if I can get it here, the microphone is key, sound is really important. So I had the kit. What I hadn't envisaged was just how steep that learning curve would be. Okay, so let's just clear those off for a minute. You get to draw on this one. So thinking about you right back when we went into lockdown, and there was, for me, there was a pause as universities kind of regrouped. What I'd like you to think about is how you felt about virtual training then and now. So if you again bring that annotate bar up, and if you select stamp, you have a choice of arrow, tick, a different cross, a star and a heart and a question mark. So what I'd like you to do is pick the heart one to start with and think about what you felt about virtual live training, which is kind of what we're doing now, at the start of lockdown in your organisation. So just select the stamp, the heart stamp, and kind of think where you might have been. Someone's decorating the screen picture. Fantastic. Okay, so a smattering. That's an interesting one, right? That was the hearts, ladies and gentlemen. Now I want you to select the star, which should come up looking like that, little gold star. Again, in that stamp, where are you now? I should have said, this is walk in the park, easy. This is the scream, all hell is breaking loose. Right, I think you got that from the pictures. Okay, so a smattering probably, and I left my stats knowledge a long time ago because I didn't think I'd need it, but I think the spread is more towards walk in the park now than it was right at the start. So we're probably getting a bit more comfortable with it. I think it's been a lot that we've had to learn, and we need to give ourselves credit for that. Not only the technical stuff, but the other stuff that I'll come on to. So fantastic. I'm going to save that picture and clear off your beautiful drawings so that I can swap. So what I found in this mad upward trajectory is that I've had to really learn to facilitate again. So I don't know how new some of you are to training and development, but I can remember being new and going into my first training and being absolutely scared stiff. And I probably had, you know, pages and pages of paper. I'd rehearsed it all in my head. I've never been one for a script, but I probably had notes that now I would look at as very much a script. I was just, you know, quaking in my boots because I wasn't sure, you know, kind of what I needed, what, you know, kind of how it was going to go, what the room was like, all those sorts of things. And I think the virtual live training that I've been doing has almost been that step back into learning how to facilitate again. So some of the things that I've thought about that I've needed to go through, and I'm sure that you have as well. So I've needed new tech skills. My first virtual live training event was a whole day women's development event. And yeah, I felt like I needed to be octopus armed to monitor the chat and do this and do that and various other things. And also, you know, keep track of who was in, who was out, people popping up and out as their internet went. So there were a lot of tech skills involved that I had to learn. Other things that you can bolt on, different technologies, different ways of perhaps capturing feedback, all those sorts of things. I had to sort of upskill. They weren't things that I would have used naturally in the training room. So, you know, kind of things like polls and all those sorts of things. I think I would have just done a show of hands. I am all for simple. So there was a lot of tech that I had to get over. There was also a new environment. Being online is odd. It's not normal. And when your participants disappear into a breakout room, you can't hear that hubbub of conversation. You're alone staring at your monitor unless you pop into the breakout rooms. So it can be really weird, and you're not getting that rapport back from the room, which let's face facts, that's a bit that I really love about face-to-face training. So there is that new environment. There is also, for me, and I'm sure very many of you, the fact that we are working from home. What I'd like you to do, just pop in the chat while I'm talking, is when you think you're going to be back face-to-face training. So if you can pop that in the chat. But for me, I don't think it's until next year. People are still on stars, so just pop in the chat. 2021 from Joe, thank you. Andrea, 2021. Summer 21, summer 21. Likely hybrid from September, Verity, well done. January, spring, Jan, not sure. Yeah, summer 21. So a big variety of when we're going to be back in something that resembles a training room. And even then, we might be in a very different training room. We might have to have social distancing. We might have people dialing in. We might be going for a more blended model. Lots and lots of different things. So that new environment, I've moved upstairs. This used to be our guest room. We're never going to have guests again. But there is that new environment. The participants are new to this. So we're new to it, but also the participants like, I'm not quite sure. Now, I've seen them getting better and better and more adept at using tools like Teams and Zoom and various other things over time. But they are still quite new to that. And actually, if we think about some of our researchers, they might not attend training that often. So we could still have someone come along to training in the next few months who their last training was face-to-face, might have been last November. I quite often see, you know, kind of people book training in clumps. So the participants are new to this. They're unsure, they're a bit worried. They don't know whether it's going to be as good, whether it's going to be worse. I think the best bit of feedback I've had over the past 4 months was, it was much better than I thought it was going to be. I was like, okay, I'm going to take that as a win. But the participants are new to this. And again, that was something that I hadn't, people knew how to behave in a training room, and you're almost telling them again how to behave in a virtual space. Not things like being rude, but just, you know, what is expected of them. And if you think about the participants, I'm going to clear off all these stars. I can ask you now to respond to me in lots of different ways. So you can give me the stars, although don't, because I'll have to wipe them off again. You can type something in the chat. You could type something to someone privately in the chat. You could write on the screen. You could perhaps message me in another way. You might be writing old style, writing your own notes. You have to be very explicit as to the instructions that you give people in the virtual training. So, you know, if we were in a training room and I said, okay, give me your ideas, and I'm stood next to my trusty flip chart, they know that I'm going to pick up a pen, ask for ideas and write them down. You know, they know the rules of engagement. Whereas if I say, give me your ideas, it's like, well, how do I do that? Do you want that in the chat? Do I put my hand up? Do I mute myself? Is it a free for all those sorts of things. So instructions become much more important. And I think we probably had them implicitly in a training room because we use our body language. So if you can all take a seat. If I could ask you and you to feedback, things like that don't work quite so well in this arena. There's been the whole building in interaction. So the thing that I loved about training rooms were those little side conversations that happened here and here. Really hard to make those happen unless you make space for them. And so you have to build in time for things like that to happen, and perhaps put people in a little group over coffee. So you say, okay, you can go and have coffee and then pop back and have a chat with the people you find in your breakout room, for instance. So one of the things we did on the conference that worked incredibly well, we thought we'd try it, and it did work really well, and people did have that sort of informal interaction, as well as, you know, breakout rooms with tasks, being able to hear other people's voices in the big room, things like that. And I've put this one in here because I haven't used Post-its in anger for months, apart from on my desk. Kind of miss Post-its. But my training bag had spare pens, Post-its, paper, tissues, all sorts of things that I'd learned over the years of training that I needed to have, because invariably someone would forget to turn up with a pencil or a pen. So again, it comes back to making sure that people are properly prepped for sessions. So when I work with researchers, I always tell them to bring a pen and a paper, because you will be taking notes. Because they think they're at home, it's kind of, I've not packed my bag. So they've not perhaps thought about it. It's like, you're going to need this. You might need some things that I've sent you prior to email. You're going to need those on the screen and be able to annotate them. Again, it comes back to those instructions being really, really, really clear. But I kind of miss my training bag. I'm sure my back doesn't. But thinking about what do we need to put in our virtual training bag to make sure that the learning experience is really key for the people around us. So it's almost like taking those baby steps again. Okay. I'm going to get you to do some talking in a minute, because I've been talking way too much. But one of the questions someone approached me when I said I'd run this webinar was, how can I learn from others? What's good practice? And how can I stop being just so tired? So really tired. So this is tiring. Virtual live training is really tiring. I don't know, there's probably been research studies into it, but I've got two big lights so that you can see me really well. I've got a light illuminating this, so you can see that in a minute. So it's bright light. I'm staring at a screen, which we all know is quite draining. For the first 3 months, I was sitting down, so I wasn't sort of pumped. Normally in a training room, you're walking around, you do have many steps on your stepper, you're using your arms, various other things. I've now bought myself a desk that can go up, so I am speaking to you standing up. I'm much more energized that way. But it's really tiring. You know, training was tiring to start with, and now we've got bright lights, a fixed point to look at, and various other things. So thinking about the good practice that I've learned along the way. So firstly, keep it quick. So people get bored quite easily. So you need to have that change of screen, whatever that might be. So keep it quick paced. So whereas you might have perhaps had, you know, kind of reflection time, or you might have given perhaps a group 30 minutes to talk about it, now I'm sort of shading probably about a third. So I would, you know, 20 minutes to talk about it and then come back. And putting those reflective bits into longer breaks. So that you say, right, okay, I'd like you to go off and think about this whilst you get up, stretch, grab a cup of tea, whatever it is, coffee in my case. I've kind of arrived at a maximum of 90-minute sessions. There are various schools of thought, and I'd love to hear your thinking on this in a moment. 90 minutes seems to be enough to do a couple of good meaty exercises with an intro. Then we'll go and have a break. Then we'll do another couple of meaty exercises, and then something to prepare for either the end of the session or coming back after lunch. So typically I've run 3 90-minute sessions, and then the last session in those day-long ones has been an hour, just because people are flagging by that point. Make sure you've got plenty of breaks. And these are not just for them, not just for our lovely, lovely researchers. They're for us. Go to the loo as you would normally. Make sure that you go and you get a drink, that you stretch, that you move. It's really, really important that we keep our energy up, because we are, pouring into this black hole of a screen. So making sure there are loads and loads of breaks is what I've really focused on, and telling people explicitly, do not sit there and check your email for the next 20 minutes, because come 4 o'clock, you're not going to be able to move. Clear instructions, words and pictures, and I'll demonstrate that on the next slide. But again, making sure that they know exactly what they're doing. Have a co-host. So I've got the lovely Gary today, who's helping me out, and I'm helping him out with his webinar tomorrow. So can you do that? Could you have a co-host? Worst case scenario is, if I'm running training by myself, is that I will log in on my plugged in computer, and then I will log in on my phone, which is relying on the signal. And that way, should my internet go down, I'm still connected to the group while I reboot the router or whatever I need to do. I'm still connected on a device that isn't dependent on the same signal source. So it would be pointless me signing that one up to the Wi-Fi, for instance, because that's going to go down if the plug-in connection's gone. So I do make sure that I have access to being another co-host if I don't have someone with a separate internet feed. And the other thing that I found, so it's not part of the exercise thing, is having different swim lanes. So if we go back to where I asked you to pop in where you are from, these, I suppose, horizontal lines are called swim lanes. I've just made it into a grid, but it does mean that everyone doesn't pile on top of each other trying to write, which you can move it around using Zoom technology, but it's just easier if you go, just pick a box. Or if you've got a designated number of people, you say, right, okay, group 6, you're in lane number 6, put your stuff in there. So swim lanes, I think, even though it's really simple, have made my life much easier. So that's me so far. I'm happy to talk with anyone about other good practice, but I'm going to hand over to you at this point. So this was one of my words and pictures. So what I found was that if I told people what to do, it was like, shoop, I've forgotten. If I just wrote the words, it was a bit better. And you can encourage them to take a picture on their phone of the instructions before they go into the breakout room, because this will vanish. So can I encourage you to do that now? But the pictures really seem to help. And I'm a very visual thinker, so presumably some of my audience are too. So it's helping to cement that extra bit. It's like, oh, stopwatch, yes, we had 10 minutes. I've got to take notes. I'm going to be working in a group. So in a moment, I'm going to pop you into breakout rooms. And what I'd like you to do is to discuss best practice in virtual live training. Now, I'm giving a bunch of trainers 10 minutes to discuss a subject that could probably, keep us amused for a week. So I really want you to just be really bullet pointy about that best practice from either your own organisation or something that you've cherry picked from somewhere else. I don't care where it's from. Good practice is good practice. If one person can take some notes, old style, and then present the top 3, and we'll pop those on the flip chart when you come back. Okay, so if everyone is still with me, I will find the breakout rooms. I think that is everyone back after their little journey in the ether. So I'm just going to go through the groups one by one. And if you remember, I just want your top 3. So if I just stop sharing, I can see everyone as well. So room 1 had Anjali, Joe, Nicole and Verity in. Who was your spokesperson?
I get that lucky job.
Hey, thank you, Verity. What were your top 3?
So we sort of started talking about a lot of the things that you had already mentioned, but one of the first things that came up was just to say, note the room number when you send people out to the breakout rooms. Sometimes it can help that they understand that there is a room number. One of the big things, though, that we really did talk about was keeping the sessions shorter and more diverse. People can focus for a little bit longer, but they need to have a change of interaction, a change of interface. And then the third one was we're thinking about the toolkit that has just the tool bag, as you were calling it, virtual image cards.
Yeah.
You can use an online whiteboard, and a great source for them as well is Charlotte Housden with a password. And I have copy pasted it, and I will try to do it again in the chat book, and it works. Yay, there it is.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. I should have said that I'm going to save the chat and also I'll screenshot this so that I'll send you an email at the end with these useful things, because I know that my writing is probably not the most legible. I'm out of practice on a flip chart. Okay, so breakout room 2 was Andrea, Esther, Eunice and Francina. Who was the spokesperson there?
That's me.
Hi, Esther.
Hi, everyone.
What to add?
So we talked about our top 3 were maybe starting a session with a really easy starter interactive task, something that doesn't require a lot of participation but eases people kind of into it. And then also spreading that interactivity and engagement throughout the session. So trying to make sure you're breaking up your times that you're presenting with a bit of engagement or interactivity with your audience.
Yeah.
And then also to make sure that when you are doing interactive tasks or anything kind of where you're asking the audience to engage with you, to really explain the purpose of why you're asking them to do that. They were our top kind of 3.
Fantastic. I think this one again, really important, going with those clear instructions so that people kind of know I'm doing this because, and then they get that sort of headline view. Thank you. Next group was Joanna, Liz, Pat and Stephanie. Who's the spokesperson?
Okay, so we failed to identify a speaker or a note taker, but we did talk.
There's
no
a surprise
there.
for someone from Yorkshire in the room.
So shall I, because I was talking at the end, so my group, are you happy for me to just pick 3 things from what we talked about? Yes, okay. So the first one was about when you're setting up any sort of session is to acknowledge that you are in people's homes and that you are a guest in their home. And I now always do that because I think it's a nice thing to actually acknowledge, and also to say to people that because we are a guest in your home, if things come around, the kids, whatever, the cat, whatever, that this is in your home, and so it's okay. The second one was I was talking about running a sort of presentation and just much more effort having to bring the speakers in and to manage that much more. So much more using names to say, Nick, if you could pick up this point, Claire, if I can ask you to do that. So much more effort and coordination on that. And just one, and then maybe someone else in the group would to add a fourth one, so it'll be a bit cheeky, is so Anesh's also here. We did a Q&A with the Vice Provost this morning, and when we looked at the recording, it's 3 white men and a white woman, so me and 3 white men, and there's nothing we can do about that, but actually to have a ground rule with, because if we'd have had all the speakers on video, it would have actually been 3 women, 3 men, and so just again to be sort of managing that. So Joanna, I can just see you if there's anything you wanted to add. So sorry Emma, we didn't get to sort of.
That's all right.
note
I
taking.
suppose maybe one of the other, I mean, they're all really good practical things actually. But one of the things we did talk a lot about was how much time you had and using flipped approaches to training. So having more content that the trainee would pre-access or pre-engage with to reduce the trainer talk time.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Joanna. Okay, breakout room 4 had Inesh, Lisa, Sandra, and Sania.
Yes,
Sania.
that's right. Yeah,
Right.
that's perfect. Thanks, Emma. So I'm the nominated speaker, but everyone else, please feel free to jump in.
I'm just going to turn over because then you can see it on the top.
Majority of what we discussed actually has sort of already been covered. We did talk about it being helpful to have a co-host and somebody that could keep an eye on the chat and the other things that happen while delivering sessions, and also that it's useful to have 2 monitors if you have the resources to have that. And alongside that, also, if possible, and if bandwidth and internet connection and everything permitting, to maybe log in as 2 sort of different entities to a session. So this happened recently where we had commissioned someone and the main screen that they were working on froze completely. And it was really helpful that they were logged in twice and able to sort of seamlessly just work on that. That's possibly overkill depending on how important the session is and whether you have the resources for that. But we also spoke about, an hour being about the optimal time, but very much building in that interactivity in it. And, maybe even from the start to give people the opportunity to switch on their cameras, give a little wave, and then also give them the opportunity to switch it off and just let them, relax and listen to whatever they need to.
Brilliant.
That covers everything.
Yeah, no, you've got 4 points in there, so bonus points. Thank you very much. And last but not least, definitely breakout room 5 was Claire, Claudia, Karen, and Rui.
All right, I'm speaking on behalf of the group. Top 3 would be a set of detailed instructions sent out beforehand, circulated beforehand. I guess to a certain extent, an extension of, who was it that just mentioned flip learning? Okay, Joanna, there we go. More often than not, we've got a choice of platforms to use. It was suggested that maybe if you start training in Zoom, for example, stick to training in Zoom, because then you familiarize people with a set of habits, a set of, controls, if for nothing else. Someone mentioned that attending as much other online training as you can is helpful, because it gives you tips on what works and what doesn't. And in fact, Karen and I both noted that we've set up plenty of breakout spaces, but had never been put in one until this very moment. So,
I've served a purpose then.
That was very, very useful, because I've always just sort of clicked and occasionally jumped in and out of breakout spaces, but never actually knew how the magic happened. So that was very useful. I have just one last cheeky question / point, and maybe you're going to deal with this later, is we're curious to know from the room, how do people maintain these connections? Because even though, as Sania's just suggested, you can sort of ask them to introduce, but my biggest problem is I'll have about this many people in a room, and maybe 2 will have their cameras on, and and then you sort of lose that connection. And whilst they might gain it again in the breakout room, it doesn't make our lives as trainers particularly easy for that.
I think what I've done for that is that, because this is a workshop or whatever, and we've got an hour, which is really curtailing my wish to talk more, is, I've had those longer breakout rooms, and I've gone in and I've said, hello, I'm here, but I'm listening to the conversation, so that you get a sense of who's in the room, who are the quiet ones, who who is perhaps a bit more dominant, because that might help you set the next breakout rooms. So I usually, I kind of give them enough time and space for that breakout room so that I can room hop to get that interaction. The other things that I've seen people do to kind of just build this cohort, when you've got the screen, is you've got 45 seconds. This is not an instruction now. You've got 45 seconds to run and go and get something that reflects your training personality or your approach to academia or whatever. And because they're in their homes, they might grab, I don't know, I've just grabbed my hairbrush, which has been my permanent lockdown partner on my desk. But, kind of you can do seemingly silly things like that kind of, firstly, it gets them up and moving, but also people will, oh yeah, she was the one with the hairbrush, or he was the one with the clown hat, or whatever it was that so you need to work quite hard at that rapport. In a training room, they would be having those side conversations. The other thing is that I always, if it's a longer course, try and get them into pairs, so that they feel that they have connected for a decent amount of time with, a fellow human being. And especially, I think, throughout, certainly when we were in proper lockdown, training spaces were as much about mental health as anything else. So we'd be talking about fellowships, but actually we'd be talking about the COVID elephant in the room, if that's not too many metaphors. So yeah, I recognise it was a real problem, really, in trying to do that. Okay.
Emma, just a point in the chat from Nicole, just to build upon the idea of a second monitor, second computer screen. And Nicole said it's kind of useful to have a second computer to see things from the participant's perspective. Yeah. So logging in as the second version of yourself to some extent. Yeah.
So now you've been in breakout rooms, you know what it's like, you know that you can get the little messages, how they pop up and various other things. So yeah, you can, kind of, I don't have two screens, but I do have a laptop that I could log in and see that way, or even on my phone. Although I think the phone's quite useful because some participants will dial in on their phone. So you just think, okay, it looks a bit weird, but I'm Android based. I don't have an Apple phone. Any client wants to pay me more so that I can have an Apple phone, that'd be great. But, so having that perspective, knowing how it looks, and that's, joining other people's training, this one, really, really important. Okay, I'm very aware of time, so I'm just going to share my last couple of thoughts with you, but thank you for those. I will take a picture and email you all with those and where to find the video once it's rendered on my computer, which takes a little while. So let's go, click. So thinking about, we could get all nostalgic about the training room, and the various things that I love about face-to-face training that I do deeply miss, but there are some things that are downside better done this way, in my opinion. So I've got one little case study, and then I'm going to ask you just if you could quickly share anything that you think is better or might be better for researchers done in this virtual way. So this was a fellowship course that I ran for a client. This is old style, this one, the half-day course, standard time I'm sure we all use for courses. They had to write a draft fellowship. They had a pro forma to do that, so it was only a page of A4. This was sort of baby steps into fellowships, but they had to do that beforehand and hand it in, lots and lots of admin. And then when they got to the session, they did the review of that, but also they were told how they should have written it. And to some extent, looking back now, that's almost like you're giving yourself a stick to beat yourself with, which seems a bit mean. Writing a fellowship is blooming hard. So what I suggested to the client, and they took me up on it, thankfully, is that I ran 2 90-minute sessions. They were separated by a couple of days. The first was tips and tricks on how to write. So it's a fellowship, so using I being very clear, not trying to sound clever, you are clever, all those sorts of things. So that was how to. And then in the 2 days between, we then had them writing, again using the same pro forma, but then they were in small groups to do peer review, and they had a form that they had to fill in on the other 2 or 3 people in their group. So they got to read 2 or 3 other draft fellowships. So they got to see how other people did it, but they could take their time. And certainly for me, I find that reading takes me a lot of time. And if I'm given a bit longer to do that, I can really get stuck into it. So thinking about accessibility as well might be something to think about building in. And then they came back for the second 90 minutes where they talked about their applications and how they found them. And then we gave them a real fellowship application to look at and to critique and almost be the panel of. So it was, it still had those same, by the end of this, you should be in a better position to write a fellowship. But this, I think, worked for them much better. They knew what they were doing as they put pen to paper, or at least they should have done. So I think it helped them write better proposals than before. I wasn't involved in the previous course, so I've got nothing to compare like with like, unfortunately. So thinking over to you, does anyone have something that they want to share? Ines, you've raised your hand. Unmute yourself.
I did. Well, I can start my video as well.
Yeah, please do.
One of the things that I found more useful is that not having to book rooms is really, really quite helpful in, in training. And you can mix and match a bit more where people are. And, for universities like ours spread around different campuses, that really, really is improving. And I think this is one of the things that online really brought as a positive note to our training. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. Anyone else with some thoughts on how it might be better or how it could be better? Just raise your hand or unmute yourself, throw yourself into it.
So I agree that the room bookings is definitely a plus.
No one likes that.
No, one of the things that I found is even though these tools were available to us before, there just didn't seem to be a willingness. There was always this skepticism, and that disappeared overnight almost. And sure, hopefully we've all gotten better in our respective approach to online training. But what I welcome now is that people will just consider it. And even now and then getting people in a room who, all right, let's just say it, they're technophobes. They're not interested. They're actually afraid of it. And maybe they're quite senior and academic and they don't want to appear to be afraid of it, but they're terrified. The fact that if you've got someone who can come along and moderate the session for them, you take it all out, you take the fear away. So I think there's a lot of empowerment in doing this. I think we can get better at it, but it did actually make me think that moving forward, there's a good chance that a good amount of the training that we'll provide might use this approach over face-to-face approaches.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Probably just got time for one more comment if anyone has any ideas.
I just want to say I think it's really good for people who don't know. I think we've had more people who aren't normally coming to a training room because it's less intimidating maybe, and they're getting better at sharing their voices because it's more on chat as opposed to saying things out loud. And I think it's actually better at getting a better overview of what everyone thinks as opposed to the few really loud ones maybe in a room who can sort of dominate the conversation. So I think it's the way forwards, to be honest with you.
Can I just add one little thing? I feel like, I haven't been working in this space for very long, but what I think has been really nice is sessions like this, where we're bringing together this many of us researcher developers from all over and talking about what constitutes good practice and sharing tips and tricks. And it's been a lot of it over the last few months, and it's been really helpful for me as I'm kind of learning to work in this area.
Yeah, you and me both, Nicole, that's for sure. Okay, I am mindful of time, so I'm just going to hop onto the next slide. So thinking about what comes next is how are we going to go into that future? So face-to-face seems a long way off, judging by the chat, you know, kind of, I think, you know, realistically, for me, it's probably going to be Easter 2021, if, you know, kind of everything goes well. But so how do we prepare ourselves for this? I'm not going to use the new normal because I don't like it. I think it's new abnormal. It's something new. We have to go back, and we have to go back to our learning objectives and think, right, okay, we had this course on fellowships and we ran it this way. Why, you know, what was the overall thing? Well, we want our research staff to be able to apply for fellowships and to be successful at them. That's the overall objective. How can we deliver that given what we've got now? I think we do have to go back to facilitation school, so we're still learning. I know that I move the mouse a lot, which I'm trying to stop doing. So I have to put my hand by my side. But other things, you know, kind of, we have to learn how to do things. And that might be, you know, stuff that is, you know, very basic, like, do I have a flip chart? Can people see the flip chart? Am I going to use whiteboard? How am I going to do all those things? So I think there is an element of learning how to be a trainer again. And I think we need to reevaluate our provision, especially in light of everything that's happened and a very uncertain graduate job market. As the owner of a university student, it's like, I've been going, stay on for the masters, there will be no jobs. So, but thinking about our researchers going into not only a post-COVID world, but a Brexit world as well. So thinking about, what do our researchers need? Are there things that they need more now than ever before? And I would hesitate to say that wellbeing is probably one of those things. But do we need more job clinics and various other things? Or do we need how to work, you know, how to structure your day? If one of my researchers was working at home in the morning and then her lab slot is in the afternoon, and she said, oh, it's a bit of a broken day. So do we have to not reinvent, but reevaluate perhaps things that we did a long time ago that have dropped out of fashion, like time management and things like that. So it's an interesting one. I am always happy to have a conversation with anyone about these things. So do drop me a line. I will email you all with where to find the video for this, and feel free to share that with people who can come along today. And I will take some screenshots as well and pop those in there. As part of that, I will link you to where you can find my newsletter, which is targeted directly at people like yourselves, so researcher developers. So there'll be a link that you can click to join on that. But you need to be fairly speedy because the first one goes out on Monday. Well, it goes out pretty much the first working day of every month. So it's once a month. I'm not going to inundate you. I'm too lazy for that one. But just with some useful nuggets for people like us. So again, that practice sharing. So thank you all very much for your time. And I will hopefully see you all soon at some other things. I do have an ideas for some other webinars perhaps coming up, so I will let you know about those. But thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you very much to Gary, who's my co-host, who has helped me keep on the straight and narrow. So have a lovely afternoon. It's going to be hot and sunny, so go and enjoy. See you soon. Bye.